There's one season left, and somebody's ass got to fill that throne post-haste. It's Game of Thrones Season 8. Let's get started. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Thumb Together TV, and today we're going to be talking about Game of Thrones Season 8 together. As usual, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and give some love to that subscribe button as well. I know last week I didn't talk about Game of Thrones, and the reason why was because I was in Chicago doing up-to-date media coverage for Star Wars fans for Star Wars Celebration, and it was quite a lot of fun. If you didn't know I did that, then you can check out the links right down below that I will put there. Follow those links to Rebel Scum Podcast, and you can see all the crazy shenanigans I got up to in Chicago, breaking the news about Star Wars and all the lightsabery goodness that came with it. But that's neither here nor there. Actually, it is there, but it's not here, because here is Westeros. And Game of Thrones is 2 episodes into its final season. It kind of worked out serendipitously, because I wanted to do a video after the premiere. I couldn't. I was out of town. However, the premiere and episode 2 both sort of fall in this nice little niche where they both kind of feel like the same episode that's just been split in half. So here we are talking about them both today. Episode 801, Winterfell, and episode 802, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. These 2 episodes are very, very chessy, and what I mean by that is they are just episodes that involve getting the chess pieces where they need to be so that the fight can happen, and we all know the fight is going to happen. There are 4 episodes left in this show, folks. Those 4 episodes, there's going to be a lot of blood and swearing, maybe some cleavage. So let's start by talking about episode 1, Winterfell. What I loved the most about Winterfell was the opening sequence where we see Daenerys and Jon Snow. They're marching with the big company of Unsullied and everything, and we see Arya Stark kind of watching them approach, and we see also another child who's just sort of climbing a tree and watching with joy as these people are approaching. And it harkens back to the very, 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 very first episode of the entire series, where the people in Winterfell were watching as Robert Baratheon and his whole entourage came marching up to visit Winterfell. They even did a beautiful thing that made my heart soar, where there is a piece of music that was played a couple of times in season 1, particularly in that scene where Robert Baratheon is approaching Winterfell. And then they never played that music again in Game of Thrones. Ever again. During this scene, in episode 1 of season 8, they played that theme again. And it was so nice hearing that beautiful callback. It just made my heart just soar and smile. It reminds me of the final episode of Lost, where they did something very similar, and they played a key piece of music that we have not heard since season 1 of Lost. So it was just a beautiful little circular auditory wraparound. As a music guy, it was the highlight of the episode for me. Now, a lot of people have been complaining, I've seen online anyway, people complaining that episode 1, Winterfell, was a very, quote, boring episode where nothing, quote, happened. I can understand, if you've been waiting 2 years to see some folks fighting some other folks, then yeah, you're going to be let down, because I don't think any folk fought any other folk in this episode, as far as I can remember. It was just, like I said, a chess piece kind of thing. You're getting all the pieces on the right side of the board so you can play a hell of a game of chess. And there are so many pieces in the Game of Thrones saga that it requires this, double dose of Winterfell and the Night of the Seven Kingdoms to get them all in one place. And that's something that I don't think Game of Thrones fans as a whole are appreciating enough, at least from what I've seen. Remember, guys, in 2012, it was a very, very big deal for us to see Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Black Widow, and Hawkeye together in one movie. It was a very big effing deal, and we cheered and applauded like there was no tomorrow. But in Game of Thrones, we have to remember, the first 2 episodes in season 1 had everybody together, and then they split apart very quickly, and they have not been together since. Until now. These opening episodes are all about appreciating that togetherness, that crossover of all these separate sagas we've been following for the past 9 years. It's about, oh my god, Arya is finally in the same room with Bran again. Or, oh my god, Tyrion is in the same room with Jaime again. It's that kind of excitement that I think people should be having right now. And I get it. You want to see the battle. You want to see the conclusion. You're going to see it. I promise. Just be excited right now, because guess what? Brienne of Tarth is in the same room as the Hound. That's happening. We should be happy that that is happening, because it is. Now, midway through this episode, we get a delightfully corny scene where Daenerys takes Jon Snow by the hand and they go to the dragons, and she's like, let's ride some dragons, boy. And he's like, I don't know if I can do this. And that's a horrible Jon Snow voice. But he gets on a dragon and he follows her, and they fly away and they go through a canyon and stuff. And it's basically like a whole new world, but without singing or carpets. Instead, there's dragons and a waterfall. And when they land at the waterfall, Jon looks like he's going to be sick. I don't blame him. And then Daenerys is like, hey, we could just chill by this waterfall and have some incestuous sex if you want. And Jon is like, I'm down. And they do. Later in the episode, however, he finds out just how incestuous that sex was, because Samwell Tarly kind of confronts him and is like, hey, listen, boy, I gotta be real with you. I talked to Bran. Bran kind of knows everything now. You're sleeping with your aunt. You're a Targaryen and she's your aunt. And Jon's like, oh, fudge, what am I gonna do? And he's, not telling her yet, because that's a delicate conversation for another day. We got ice zombies to worry about first. Jon is also finally reunited with Arya. The two of them had a very beautiful bond. I mean, again, you think back, season 1, episode 2 or something, he gives her needle. He's like, here's your first sword. I'm going to go join the Night's Watch. I'm really going to miss you. And she's like, I'm going to miss you too. I'm an innocent child yet, because the shit that happened to me in season 5 is still 4 seasons away. So right now I'm just a wide-eyed youth with spunk. And he's like, me too. I want to go to the wall and be a ranger. I'm spunky too. And they hug in a spunky fashion and they separate. We have not seen them together till now. Now they're like, hey, what's up? I've seen some shit. Me too. I fought an ice zombie. What did you do? I joined a group of assassins who take people's faces off. It's kind of like a weird Nicolas Cage thing that we do now. It's sort of magic, I guess, because the disguises are really good. I can't really explain it either. I'm probably a witch. And they just hug it out because they have been through so much. The ringer has wrung them out, left them to dry, and now they're just these two drying people who turn and be like, oh, wow. Remember in season 1 when we were just chilling in Winterfell as a family? How far we've come. That's what these 2 episodes are all about. And I was so happy to see Jon Snow and Arya together at last and just kind of being their old selves again, even if just for a moment, to be like, hey, check out my sword. Oh yeah, check out my sword. It's pretty heavy. Even I can't lift it. Don't tell Daenerys, though. I kind of want to impress her. She might be my aunt, but she's good in bed. And throughout it all, Bran is just rolling back and forth in the courtyard, being creepy and just staring at folks like this. And he knows everything and sees everything all at once, always. I gotta be real. Right now, Bran is my least favorite part of Game of Thrones. I don't like when characters just become these monotone sort of like, I know everything. That's one of the reasons why I hated Cable from the Cable and Deadpool comics, because he's like, I'm a time traveler and I know everything all the time, so you can never beat me. Ha. I am the most uninteresting thing ever. Bran is getting to that point for me. He's just... There's nothing human about him anymore, and I don't sympathize with him when he's on screen. So I'm waiting for that to change. I'm waiting for him to be humanized by whatever's going to happen in the plot. Until then, as far as I'm concerned, he's just an exposition piece sitting in a wheelchair with a tilted head. Sorry, Bran. And that first episode ends with Mr. Jaime Lannister himself showing up at Winterfell again for the first time since season 1. This is a big deal. We should be excited about this. And he comes face to face with Bran and he's like, oh shit, there's that kid I pushed out a window. Ew. And Bran's just like, I remember you. I don't care one way or the other, though. And that brings us into episode 2, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. If you are not a fan of gallows humor, first of all, why are you watching Game of Thrones if that's the case? But you're definitely not going to be a fan of this episode, because season 8, episode 2 is literally just 58 minutes of gallows humor. It's 58 minutes of, well, death is coming for us. Let's drink some wine and talk about how our last few hours on this earth are kind of shit because we're with people we don't really like. Cheers! But again, this is not an episode where nothing happens. This is an important episode. I bring back my Avengers comparison. We get a shot in this episode where every key player, and I'm talking every key player, is standing around a map discussing the battle to come. That is glorious. We should be more excited about this, and I have yet to see anybody on social media anywhere talk about how great it was to see everybody in Game of Thrones canon who is important standing around a map unified in their desire to beat the White Walkers. When I say everybody, obviously I'm leaving out Cersei because she's a whiny little brat who stayed in King's Landing and not helped out. Thanks, Cersei. But the general consensus around the folk at Winterfell is that they are not going to survive this battle. Obviously, they're pissed because they don't have Cersei's support. She lied about sending her army to go fight, because that's the kind of person Cersei is. She's just a selfish biatch. She's got her golden company just kind of backing her up down south, and without her numbers, it doesn't look good for our heroes. So they're just kind of there pulling up their bootstraps and doing whatever they can to ensure that they stand at least a fighting chance. It's very reminiscent of the moments leading up to the Battle of Helm's Deep in the Two Towers. You know, you got kids who are just arming themselves, and they are clearly too young to be wielding a sword, but they're like, well, screw it. Nobody else is fighting. Here we go. One interesting thing to note about this episode is a certain Miss Arya Stark loses her V card to a certain Mr. Gendry, which is kind of neat because people have been sort of whispering that these two might have had a thing for each other ever since the finale of season 1, where they kind of met up and escaped King's Landing together with that other group of kids. You know, there was always a little bit of a spark there. But of course, they were much younger back then. Now Arya is, I don't even know how old Arya is supposed to be, 17? 18? She's not young anymore. Like, she's old enough to be like, hey, I consent to having sex with this person. Let's go! You know, everybody who was shipping them around the world is all like, yay! Champagne all around. And it's kind of a scary moment because, you know, there's no joy in it, really. At least not for Arya. She's just sort of like, I want to know what this feels like before I die, so let's get it on. Again, very gallows humor. There's a wonderful fireside conversation where just a group of characters sit around a fireplace in the main hall of Winterfell, sharing stories, sharing songs. That's where the title of the episode comes from, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, because Brienne of Tarth is still, you know, bringing up the fact that she can't be a knight because women can't be made knights in Westeros. And Jaime Lannister is like, you know what? F that. I'm making you a knight. Kneel down. And he knights her. And it's such a beautiful, tear-jerking moment. Like, it got me choked up. Ever since we've known Brienne of Tarth since season 2, she has wanted to become a knight. That's sort of her thing. And she basically is in everything but name at this point, because she is one of the most honorable people in Westeros. So getting to see her be knighted in front of everybody and all these people, you know, Tormund Giantsbane, Tyrion Lannister, Podrick, they're all applauding her. They're all, you know, happy to see that she is happy. And this is the first time, I think, ever that we really get to see just pure, unadulterated joy on Brienne of Tarth's face, which is so wonderful considering what is about to potentially happen to all these characters. Speaking of Tormund Giantsbane, he did return back to Winterfell. He survived, you know, all the rubble and stuff of the wall being collapsed from the end of last season, and we saw last episode too. He got out okay, but things are not good up north. But Tormund shows up and reunites with Jon Snow. Now, I don't know if I'm missing something. Maybe they brought this up in the last episode already, and if so, I'm sorry for forgetting, but I feel like the first words out of Tormund Giantsbane's mouth when he arrived at Winterfell would have been, Jon, they have a dragon now. And he didn't say that. There was no sort of preemptive warning like, guys, the White Walkers turned the dragon into a zombie, it breathes blue fire, that's how the wall got knocked down. If they brought it up in 801, then I just missed that. But if they didn't, then I feel like that's information the people of Winterfell might want to know. The bad guys have a dragon now. Tormund didn't say that, so I don't know what's going on there. Somebody help me out. Does everybody know? Does everybody know about the zombie dragon? They should know about the zombie dragon. Now, Jon spends most of this episode, like he spends most of the series, just kind of standing around brooding and staring at things. And Daenerys is all like, hey, baby. And she's got like a t-shirt on that says like, Mrs. Jon Snow. And he's just like not having it because now he knows that they're related. So after, you know, refuting her advances, she kind of gets a little bit annoyed and she follows him into the crypt and she's like, hey, what's up? And she sees him looking at a statue of Lyanna Stark and she's like, who's this lady? And he tells her exactly who she is. And he breaks the news right then and there. He's like, look, I am Aegon Targaryen. Your brother and Lyanna Stark, they're my parents. She's obviously not thrilled at the news. But what's interesting is that while Jon seemed like he was more emotionally struck, like, oh man, this woman I fell in love with is, related to me now. I can't, this sucks. This is a bad situation. Whereas with Daenerys, it seems more like she's just like, oh, so you got a claim for the throne now. This is turning political. You're going to try to usurp me. And they're taking Daenerys in an interesting direction. She's becoming very confrontational with the people at Winterfell. She's very forceful with Sansa. They did not get along. She has a nice little conversation with her in this episode where she tries to make peace, but she's clearly still trying to dominate as well. Daenerys is not, allowing anybody to be equal to her except Jon. And that extends to his family as well. Like, she wants Sansa to bow to her. And now that she finds out that Jon is who he really is, it's, she feels betrayed. She's like, oh, so the throne is rightfully yours. I'm not cool with that. Of course, we really don't get into any more of this argument because as soon as the words are barely out of Jon's mouth, the horns start a-blowing, the people run up to the wall, and they stare out over the horizon. And here comes the White Walkers on their horses. Now, we don't see the Night King, because he's probably up riding the dragon somewhere, but they know they have to kill him. They know that if they get him, they'll probably be able to stop the army. And as they see the army of the dead approaching, Daenerys and Jon share a look, and they run off, presumably, to mount their dragons and get shit done. And that's how we leave off with episodes 1 and 2 of Season 8 of Game of Thrones. This is tension personified. That's what it is, baby. It is 100% tension personified, and I loved these 2 episodes so much. They are exactly what we need to prepare ourselves for what I'm sure are going to be 4 emotionally and physically exhausting episodes. And we sort of needed this moment with them in the same way that they needed the moment to kind of sit by the fire and talk with one another and knight Brienne and have some wine and share some laughs and stories and have a little chuckle here and there before facing their impending doom. Just like they needed that as people in this world, we needed that as fans of the show to spend one last series of moments with all these characters we have grown to love over the past 9 years before plunging headfirst into what is sure to be catastrophic war and absolutely terrifying consequences of that war. So instead of complaining that you were disappointed with these 2 episodes of just, preamble and reunions, relish it. Relish it the way that the characters are relishing their last moments on Earth. Relish it the way Arya is relished, because she is certainly relishing some Baratheon bastard right now, I can tell you that much. Relish it because it's all downhill from here, and I don't mean that in a bad way, I mean that in a sad way. Maybe you haven't read the Game of Thrones books because they're kind of thick and intimidating, but if you're intimidated by thick books, you'll probably be intimidated by Side Scroller, the novel that I wrote and self-published. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook format. Side Scroller is a delightful tale that takes place in a world that runs on the logic of video games. I promise you, it is not as sad as what we're about to see in Game of Thrones, but it is still pretty great, and I'm very proud of it. And you should pick up a copy for yourself and all of your loved ones. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you here next time, and until then, adios.